Welcome to Wildlife Rehabilitation from Rescue to Release, a podcast dedicated to licensed wildlife rehabilitators and the veterinarians who support them. I'm your host, Gail Buell. Techniques we discuss here are meant for licensed wildlife professionals. If you aren't licensed and trained for wildlife rehabilitation, do not attempt to rehabilitate any wild animal. If you do find an injured wild animal, a wildlife professional can recommend next steps. We'll tackle topics about rescue, care, management, reconditioning, and releasing wildlife found in North America. This is a deep dive into each subject. We hope to give rehabilitators information they can use because they're already going to great lengths to rescue and nurse animals back to health. There are three possible outcomes in wildlife rehabilitation: release, euthanasia, and placement. An injured or orphaned wild animal's journey to restored health and independence is delicate and complex. In turn, we draw techniques and expertise from many disciplines. Many animals brought into rehabilitation cannot be saved. The last gift we can give them is humane euthanasia. We will talk more about when this is necessary. Sometimes animals are deemed non-releasable and evaluated to be suitable for a life in captivity. When that happens, we shift to a long-term approach to managing their care, training, and housing. These animals serve as ambassador animals, for the animals that rehabilitators use to educate the public. Each episode, we'll speak with experts who represent specialty topics across the profession of wildlife rehabilitation and ambassador animal care and management, showcasing best practices. I'm back with the second part of my in-depth discussion with Laura Davich-Jette, a Minnesota-based expert on eastern cottontail rabbits. In case you missed the last episode, we covered rabbit hemorrhagic disease, or RHDV2, a highly contagious illness sweeping across North America. Today, we dive into the specifics of raising, but especially feeding, eastern cottontail rabbits. Welcome, and let's talk cottontails.
Well, there's a lot to talk about. So where do you want to start, Gail?
We've talked a couple times previously about natural history and some of the phone calls you get and how to prevent unintentional orphans, because we know that a lot of these animals are not orphans. We definitely want to leave them in place. So we're going to talk about those animals that do need care, that we do know that they're an orphan or maybe they're injured, so we have to make them an orphan, that kind of thing. And then they come into care. So once they're in care, and I specifically didn't say any specific ages because we're going to cover some of that, what are the first things you do?
Well, just like admitting any species to your care, the very first step is going to be, doing that initial examination to determine, the animal's needs, their immediate needs. And given that rabbits are a prey species and they're a very high stress species, doing this in a format that's going to, reduce stress for these animals. Some situation has happened. This animal now needs to come into our care. And we want to, start from the very beginning at setting up kind of a therapeutic environment for them. So if the animal's really stressed, you may need to just let them have a rest when they first come in. We want to grab them out of that box and do a physical exam right away, but it might be best just to let them have some time to decompress, to kind of settle down, especially if the member of the public, say, maybe was driving 90 miles an hour with the radio blasting and the windows down and kids screaming in the background. So we know they're coming potentially from, kind of a stressful situation into our care. So letting them rest, letting them settle down, doing a quick peek to make sure there's not any, immediate life-threatening injuries or something that needs immediate care, and then proceeding with that physical exam. There's lots of great resources on how to do a really good, kind of head to toe or nose to tail examination on animals. My practice for eastern cottontails and the rabbits that come to me is I purposely go from tail to head.
Ooh, that's interesting. Why?
So, as a prey species, they're, they see us, we look like predators. We've got forward facing eyes. We're big, we're scary. So keeping their head covered so they can't see you is going to help reduce the stress. So kind of starting at that back end and working up is kind of, again, minimizing that stress until the last moment. And then you can set them down and let them recover from that stressful examination. So, yep, I kind of start at the back and work my way forward. Again, great resources on physical exams, but you're going to be, generally assessing their age and developmental status, including their weight. You're going to be checking for, a lot of times these orphans or, other, debilitated animals are coming in hypothermic, they're cool. So making sure that you're, providing a gentle heat source for them. Hydration. So many of these animals, again, are coming in dehydrated, especially those orphans that haven't been fed by mom for, several feedings or potentially several days. And assessing the level of dehydration so you can determine a rehydration therapy plan. Based upon, those protocols set and the data set by the veterinary community, or your veterinarian may help, develop a plan based upon their level of dehydration. Again, looking for injuries or illness. We talked about RHDV2. So looking immediately potentially for any signs of hemorrhage or disease in those rabbits, and having a plan set up for if those are there upon admission. Again, injuries, working with your veterinarian on your protocols about how you're going to, treat those injuries. Parasites, and looking at, a lot of them come with fleas, fly eggs, which hatch into maggots, cuterebra larvae, ticks. So there's all sorts of little creepy crawlies that may be on those animals that will need to be, removed either right away or eventually. And then again, that kind of continual reassessment of their stress level. So as you're starting your, tail to head examination, if the animal starts getting increasingly agitated, it's flailing, it's trying to get away, or if you see open mouth breathing, that's a hard stop on that animal. You're at risk of losing that animal from capture myopathy, or basically kind of stress-induced death. And you need to immediately set that animal down and give it, a good 20 to 30 minutes to kind of settle down before, resuming your physical exam and assessment of that animal.
Okay. One of the things that during that, I love the fact that you go from tail to head. To me, it's really being animal centric, that it's not just, I've got to get this done. And I would normally think about going head to tail, and I certainly go head to tail. Right now, I'm going to change my protocol for any of the rabbits that I get in. That's wonderful. Nice pro tip. So thank you for that. So you have the animal, you've worked with the animal. I did want to ask, what are some key things that you look at when you're assessing hydration? What do you do?
So we're going to do a skin tenting test, which again, there's great videos online. You can Google, skin tenting hydration test, and there's great veterinary videos, oftentimes obviously in wild animals, but the process is the same as where you're going to just gently pull up the skin kind of in the scruff or between their shoulder blades. And you're going to kind of gently pull it up into a little tent and then let go. If it drops quickly back down to, the normal location of it, the normal skin level, that animal's hydrated. And if there's a delay in that, if the skin kind of slowly goes back down, or if it stays tented like that, that's very severe dehydration.
And that's happening because the tissues are kind of sticky, right? Because they don't have as much fluid to help them flow and move. Normally, that's a totally layman's description of that.
So that's a great way to describe it. Yes, is that we're not hydrated, we're not plump full of juices, and so our skins get sticky, and when you pull it up, it sticks like that. So again, very severe, potentially deadly dehydration, as if it just stays stuck up and tented. Most of them are going to have a delayed or a slower, dropping of that skin tent, and you'll need to look at doing rehydration. In wildlife rehabilitation, we do that a lot with subcutaneous fluids, which is an injection technique that, I would assume that most of us wildlife rehabilitators are trained in and familiar with, but that's where you take sterile fluids with a sterile syringe and needle, and inject it into that, again, that kind of scruff area between their shoulder blades. Again, for those who maybe aren't familiar with it, have your veterinarian teach you this technique. But you need to make sure you're going, parallel to the spine when you go to inject that. And you're not sticking the needle downward, into the animal where you could potentially puncture
anything,
the animal, either its spine, bones, muscle, tissue, things like that. So the idea is that you're entering that fluid, you're kind of filling up a bubble underneath the skin on the animal's back between their shoulder blades. So then they can absorb into their body.
Yep. And this is something, to work with your veterinarian on, and they can also help you obtain the sterile fluids that we're talking about, whether it's lactated ringers or whatever they would like you to use. Are there other ways? So the skin tenting is my main method too, but I'm also looking a little at eyes, seeing if they're kind of shiny or dull. I sometimes look at the mouth to see if we've got, and it's a little hard with young rabbits, but stringy saliva, or are we pale? Are we kind of sticky on the inside there? Are those areas that you look at too when you're looking?
I do, absolutely. Yep. As you said, if they're very young rabbits, their little mouths, just the way they're
tiny,
designed, are kind of hard to get a good look at, say, their tongue and their gum line. Again, additionally speaking, that's going to be very stressful for the species, is having their head and their mouth kind of opened and looked at. It's an important part of our exam, but to do it quickly. So if you're struggling to get a real good look at those mucous membranes, unless there's concern for injury or something else with the mouth, I wouldn't stress the rabbit out, forcing its mouth open. But yes, those looking at those mucous membranes and their eyes, again, kind of, especially if they're kind of a little bit more sunken and, like you said, dull, are other indicators of dehydration in them. And also their general attitude. If you're dehydrated, they're typically not as active or robust. So you may see kind of some reduced activity or some lethargy. But these animals are also coming in, again, in probably subpar condition in some way or another. So lethargy in and of itself isn't specific to that. It can be a symptom of a wide variety of conditions in an animal.
Exactly. How long does a exam go for?
Well, it depends on what problems you identify. In a healthy rabbit, you can do a very thorough, kind of tail to head physical exam. Really in like just less than 2 minutes. They can be very quick and thorough once you get practiced in it. Looking them over, again, kind of head to tail, palpating or feeling all of their limbs and extremities for any injuries. It's best to, especially as you're, maybe a novice or a beginner, you don't necessarily have to know what's wrong, but just to identify something doesn't match the other side.
Oh, symmetry.
Thankfully, yes, we are symmetrical creatures. So as if you're feeling kind of both of the back legs and one doesn't feel the same as the other, your veterinarian can help determine what that something is, but you can at least then say, oh, this is a point that I need to readdress or reassess with my veterinarian, my mentor, whoever, for the beginner. So using that symmetry to guide your exam. But typically, you can go tail to head, all of the extremities, and then also the underside. Don't forget to look at the underside of the animal.
Easy to do, easy to forget.
And so then I basically go tail to head, and I flip the animal over last. Animals in general, their bottom side is their vulnerable side. So flipping an animal over onto its back is very, very stressful. So that's, again, kind of do the head and flipping them over as the last things, and be very quick and focused with that. So unless I'm finding lots of things that need attention, again, a good thorough exam can take place in just a few minutes.
Okay, excellent. And then, of course, you always have a form or something that you're writing that information down so you can get it into either your database or make sure you have those records. And I think, because I've certainly had a lot of Cottontails brought to me, that finder information, the people who are bringing it to you, we need as much background information as possible, because we don't know if they fed this animal anything. We don't know if all the kids passed it around the neighborhood because it looked tame and we're helping this animal when in reality that's not, those kind of things too. That background information is really important. And then writing down the physical exam findings.
Correct. Yep. I personally have both an intake form that I have the public fill out, and it hits up some of those key points. Is there an obvious injury the public is aware of? Did they see or suspect that a cat had it? That's critical information. Or another animal, exactly what happened that they found it? When did they find it? Did they feed it? Did they give it any medicines or medical care? Well-meaning people will sometimes give animals medications that are okay for, say, a dog or a cat that can be potentially fatal to a rabbit. And so making sure that you collect all that information from the public is going to help your care of the animal. And then also it's going to help you then be able to educate them regarding the species, what to do in the future. Not being judgmental, not yelling at them, but using it as a point to educate if something wasn't done correctly or appropriately as well, using that as a way to educate and to advocate for the future care of animals they may find. So my exam form also is very purposeful, so I don't forget anything. So I have little check boxes for basically all the major systems, as well as areas of the body to assess. I have a little skeletal diagram of a rabbit, so I can either circle or highlight. It also lists the bones. So if I talk to my veterinarian, it can help me to say, I found a problem on the femur, but you can also use the word thigh and your veterinarian, but that exam form has helped kind of educate me and helped guide my examination of that animal. So I don't forget to look at something. It's very easy to go to the big obvious injury, but you might miss something more significant. So being thoughtful and meticulous in your exam and using a well-developed form is going to help as well.
Yeah. Post-its ain't going to do it.
Nope.
No, you need a form. Yeah. And it'd be great, certainly if we all had little touch screen computers, we could just kind of do it right there. I'm definitely paper and then electronic database still, but yeah, the paper, I need to write it. But that really, really helps a lot. So, okay, we've gotten our physical exam done. We're going to go with a healthy, maybe slightly dehydrated rabbit. How do we age these to know what our next steps are?
Yep. So there's general kind of diagrams for both developmental stage regarding kind of developmental landmarks, such as when they open their eyes, when they start kind of more developing fur. So rabbits are altricial. They're born naked with their eyes closed. Whereas say a hare species, so here in Minnesota, we've got, our snowshoe hare and our jackrabbit, those are fully furred and mobile at birth. So we won't go into those as much, but kind of identifying that if you get, this rabbit that looks different, being aware of the other potential lagomorph species in your area and being able to correctly identify those. But if you get in, a neonatal rabbit, so a newborn, typically they're going to be, kind of 25 to 35 grams. They're still going to be pink on their tummies, very little. They're kind of brown or gray on the top, or kind of brown or black on the top. And then they're going to have their eyes and ears closed. So you're going to know that's a very itty bitty newborn baby. Over the course of several days, so maybe kind of more 3 to 6 days, they're going to start gaining weight. You're looking more at kind of 30 to 50 plus grams. You're going to start seeing little guard hairs and little furs start developing on their backside. Maybe that abdomen, instead of being that nice pink tissue, is now starting to turn a little bit more white. 7 to 10 days, again, you're looking at kind of more 50 to 70 grams, more fur, more development. They typically open their eyes at around 7 to 10 days as well. So that's kind of a big marker, is once those eyes start to open. And then when they're, 10 to 14 days, they're going to definitely be, more robust, healthier, You're going to start seeing, they're fully furred. Those eyes are open. Those ears are open. They're going to be more mobile at that point too.
Okay.
So little babies kind of just sit there and twitch as they age and get older. You'll see them that they're more able of kind of crawling, or, little hopping as well. So you'll see those developmental kind of landmarks and stages.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. So we have a general guidelines for age. We've got a fairly healthy orphan. Now what?
So then we need to look at, again, our rehydration. So we talked about, potentially giving, subcutaneous fluids. You can also, and you want to start with oral rehydration as well. These babies are coming off of mom's milk, and we don't want to immediately jump to a wildlife, milk replacement formula for them. So you want to kind of prime their gastrointestinal tract with like an electrolyte solution. So this could be Fox Valley's electrostat, adequately reconstituted per the instructions. Some people use Pedialyte. You can use water as well, but I like providing that electrolytes because oftentimes with dehydration, it's not just a water deficit. It's an imbalance in those electrolytes in the body system as well.
Okay.
So
does it matter if it's Pedialyte, flavored or unflavored? Does it matter?
I personally use the Fox Valley electrostat. So
got it.
I would be careful with some of the flavors and just making sure that there's not, say, like increased sugar content to them.
Yes.
Yes. I like the electrostat. It's shelf stable. I can mix it up in small quantities. So I don't have to worry about wasting a big bottle of it sitting in my fridge, if I'm not going through it as often.
Right.
Plus Pedialyte is expensive.
Yes, it is. It is.
I'm a big user of the Fox Valley electrostat as my kind of primary electrolyte rehydration solution.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. So continue on.
Yep. So we've rehydrated that animal. We've kind of primed its gastrointestinal tract. Something I haven't mentioned yet that is critically important is that you have to make sure that your animal is normothermic. So you cannot feed cold animals or hypothermic animals. So while you're stabilizing that admission, to make sure that you're getting them on a heat source, most often in wildlife rehab, we're using heating pads set on low. Under half of the, enclosure that we have them in. So these little neonatal guys coming in might be in just like a little plastic bin or a critter keeper, even for the little itty bitty guys, an ice cream bucket, but making sure that it's under half of the enclosure and that you're kind of reassessing the heat so the animal's not getting too overheated and that they have the ability to move away from it if needed. Right. So once your animal is warm and rehydrated, so again, you're doing that rehydration, the oral rehydration after they're warm, you're going to look at starting to introduce a formula.
Okay.
Now, I know anyone who's familiar with rabbits and rabbit rehabilitation is waiting for the silver bullet in rabbit formulas.
Right.
I'm sorry to say,
Laura. Here I was like expecting.
Yes,
I get it. There just isn't.
One thing I found very reassuring for my own wildlife rehabilitation is after going to a National Wildlife Rehabilitation Symposium put on by NWRA and gathering with other rabbit rehabilitators from around the nation, that nobody yet has that silver bullet. So it's a little reassuring, but it's also frustrating. Right. There's a variety of ones we can use, and it doesn't seem like one has been significantly better than the rest. I personally have tried several different formulas over the years. I've been a wildlife rehabilitator for 18 or 19 years now, and I've tried a wide variety. I have not tried them all. And I will say what works for me might not work as well for somebody else. Particularly in the country, we have variations in the species of cottontails. And then there's a variety of hare species as well that are rehabilitated differently. There's some key differences in those. So just keep that in mind if you, have a hare brought into your care. But nobody has yet found the one formula that's been head and shoulders against the rest. But
So my question then is, and I know you're maybe just about to say this, is okay, there's lots of formulas out there. I'm a new rehabilitator. How in the world do I wade through all this stuff to figure out what to try?
yeah, so it's good to be working with an experienced Cottontail rehabilitator or have a mentor that you can go to.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there's a lot of different products, like Fox Valley is, a company that makes formulas specifically for species. Mm-hmm. So they have a product that's 3240 that's made for rabbits and squirrels, and I can't remember if possums are on there too, but they have, specific, kind of formulas based on the different species and their ages. Mm-hmm. That's one that I have tried. If using Fox Valley, I do supplement with Ultra Boost.
And that's also Fox Valley, correct?
It is also Fox Valley. So rabbits, as they're only fed twice a day naturally by their mother, they have, you have to get a lot more nutrition and calories into their little bodies in fewer feedings. Mm-hmm. So we have to make sure that our formulas are nutrient dense so that they're getting adequate nutrition for, the number of feedings that they're getting per day. But it also has to be digestible.
Oh, there's that little thing. It's got to be digestible.
And rabbits, we'll get into this later, are notoriously have gastrointestinal issues. So, well, speaking of, so we've talked earlier about there being Facebook groups for rabbit rehabilitators, networking with other rehabilitators and things. So currently, starting last year, I've started using the Wombaroo formula. It's out of
Wombaroo. W-O-M, like wombat?
Yes, but with a roo at the end.
With a roo at the end. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
It's a product from Australia. Mm-hmm. So it's not something that if you're buying it direct from Australia, now there's some other intermediate places you can get it in the United States, but it's out of Australia, specific for rabbits. So it's not a multi-species formula. I started using it last year and I've been impressed with it. I'll continue using it this year to kind of evaluate my success with it. I won't say that again, it wasn't the silver bullet that I had no problems with my rabbits, but I did find it that I had good growth and development with my rabbits. And one of the things I noticed was switching to this formula as compared to in the past when I've used either Fox Valley, again, with the Ultra Boost, or another formula that some other rehabilitator facilities here use in Minnesota is KMR and Ultra Boost combination. So they do a 1-to-1 mixture of that. Is that I found with this Wombaroo formula, I was getting better weight gain and development of the really young rabbits.
Okay.
So I didn't maybe notice as much of a difference if I took in an older rabbit or, an older litter of bunnies. But when I'm taking in those more neonatal guys that we know are kind of extra challenging because they just haven't had that kind of critical period with mom, that I found that I had overall better success with the eventual release of those rabbits and their survival rate. And I think I, kind of chalk that up to that, better nutrition and that digestibility of that formula in that neonatal time period.
So we've decided on our diet. And now how are we going to introduce that diet to the bunny?
As we talked about that first, we're getting them rehydrated, kind of priming that gastrointestinal tract with, a feeding. It doesn't necessarily have to be a whole feeding, like a stomach capacity feeding. We'll get to that in a second of that rehydration solution, but kind of just clearing that out, doing that first feeding. And we're going to introduce the formula slowly. So you're going to dilute, you'll mix up your formula per the package or however, whichever formula you're using, mixing it up, and then you're going to dilute it out and start at just like a 25% formula and do that first feeding. The next formula, kind of 50%, kind of 75 and 100. That's, if you're only feeding your rabbits twice a day, that's like, 2.5 days to get to full strength formula. And if your rabbits are coming in really debilitated, that's, kind of a long extra time to go without, with kind of deficient nutrition provided. Okay. I do assess, and some of this is just experience. So, when you're just starting out, kind of go by the books. But as you become experienced and you have more time, you can kind of take a look at how the animals are doing and potentially move that up a little bit. I still always do a progressive move to full strength formula.
Okay.
But sometimes I'll kind of do 25, maybe kind of like 66 and then 100.
Okay.
So I might
Okay.
not necessarily go specifically in, quarter chunks to get to that
Sure.
100% full strength formula.
Right.
But it can be kind of challenging again, just to determine who's going to have a bigger struggle, digesting that and kind of getting onto that commercial diet as compared to mom's milk.
Sure. Do you use any probiotics or other supplemental yogurt? I don't know, things to kind of help. We were talking just briefly about the gut, but do you use any of those types of products?
I do. And again, I've tried a lot of different things over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of different opinion and
not a lot of study.
Yes. Yeah. And Oxbow is doing some really exciting stuff potentially with rabbit gastrointestinal flora. So I'm looking forward to seeing what might come out of, Oxbow animal nutrition and the research they do in the future. But you're right, a lot of this is more kind of anecdotal or kind of home-based research, trial and error from the greater wildlife rehabilitation community. Personally, what I've been using that seems to do pretty well for me is to use the mammal Benny back.
Oh, yeah.
I buy it in the tube, so it's more of the paste. So I'm not mixing it into the formula. And then we'll get into feeding techniques as well. But then that way I just put a little bit of it on the tip and then introduce that with the feeding.
Okay.
So I do dose them with the Benny back. With the feedings that I do.
Sure.
There's products that you can mix into the formula. Certain things to mention with formula and then any additives to it. Formula should only be refrigerated for 24 hours. So you should be mixing it up once a day. It takes to have all of those little particles adequately dissolve in the water. I like to mix it up in advance. So if you just stir it together and it looks, to the naked eye, it looks dissolved in there, but we know that there's going to be, larger chunks of formula or something that's going to be hard for that rabbit to digest. And so I mix it up in advance because I'm personally feeding my rabbits twice a day. I just mix it up and prepare, in preparation for the next feeding. Got it. But you should not have it for more than 24 hours unless you are freezing it. So, that's something that if you wanted to make sure you always had some on hand, you could freeze it into ice cubes or other type of container. And then your additives, so any digestive aid should be added at the time of feeding, not mixed into the formula in advance.
So you're not screwing around with whatever balance is happening in that solution for nutrients and things like that. That makes total sense. And good also pro tip about, it only lasts for 24 hours, mix it up for a 24-hour certain temperature. Is that just according to package directions?
Package directions for how you're mixing it up. Obviously things dissolve better in warmer water. But also boiling water might denature certain, particles in the formula, depending on what you're using. So I use a nice hot water, but not boiling. There's also a very interesting talk and discussion going on about what water you're using. I do not have a specific opinion on that one particularly. I know some people feel very adamant about using, spring water or filtered water. I have a water dispenser where I get, the big 5-gallon jugs of filtered water and it heats it up for me. So I can just push a button and I get nice hot water straight out of that. So that's what I use.
Oh, well, now that's a nice little, I have to have this water thing because it's for the rabbits.
Yeah, but
I can make my tea.
Yes, that's very convenient. But I also successfully rehabilitated rabbits by mixing up my formula with tap water for several years too. So, but it's an interesting thing that our community can discuss and potentially look into in the future, as we try to really hone in on what's the absolute best, most successful thing we do. So there's all sorts of extra things that we can look at as far as what we're doing in our wildlife rehab activities to see what may or may not make a difference in the care of the animals we do.
Exactly.
So, mixing it up with warm water. When I feed, you want to make sure that you're providing them warm formula. So I have a little mug warmer that's plugged in. I put a big mug that's filled with warm water on the inside. And then I put my little jar of formula in that, so it's not directly on the heating element.
Okay.
And then I have a digital thermometer that I stick in there. So I keep it right around 100 plus degrees.
Okay.
So off the top of my head, I think rabbits usually sit around kind of like 102 to 104, maybe. Somebody will correct me, I'm sure. But warm fluids, you don't want to be feeding them cold stuff. So warm, so kind of right around, 100 degrees. Mm-hmm. If I'm syringe feeding, I find that they nurse better if it's maybe even more like 102, 103. As compared to the 100. Mm-hmm. And anecdotal, you just want to make sure that it's not too hot. You don't want to burn them. So I really love having the thermometer in there because it's completely fail safe, but you can also, test it on like the inside of your wrist, kind of like people do for human babies.
Yep. If it's too warm for you there, it's too warm for them.
Yep, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but those little nuances and trying to get it, kind of a stable temperature until their liking, mm-hmm. I think is just really beneficial and really will help with the success of that group of rabbits.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we've got the formula, we've got it at the right temperature. Now I just want to tell everybody that, as we go through with this podcast, there are maybe not lots, but there's several different methods of raising cottontail rabbits, Eastern cottontail rabbits, that are great, that work really, really well. There's also ways that don't work so well, but there's a lot of different ways. So what we're going to be discussing next, is one way. And it works very well for Laura, partly because most rehabilitators have to work outside of the rehabilitation activities. And Laura is no exception to that. And she works very long hours. So I'll let her explain a little bit about why she's going more with the natural history of rabbits and how she feeds her young bunnies. Okay, Laura, take over.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I work long shifts as an emergency room nurse. So I need to be able to make sure that I'm providing adequate care to these animals in the time I have before or after my shifts, and getting maybe a few hours of sleep in there for myself. Sometimes less than others, especially mm-hmm. during the busy rehab season. So I personally, the primary way that I feed my rabbits in my care is I do tube feeding, where you're placing a small flexible tube, through their mouth, down their esophagus, into their stomach, dispensing, the calculated amount of formula. So we'll talk about that here in a second as well. And then gently removing that tube. For me, that way I'm ensuring that the rabbits are getting all of the formula, so if they're kind of a reluctant feeder or something like that, they're getting their full kind of caloric intake that's been determined. Mm-hmm. And it's faster for the vast majority of rabbits. Now, sometimes you'll get in babies that, you can use a syringe and a little nipple tip, and there's a wide variety. And again, I know you'll talk with other rabbit rehabilitators that use that as their primary way, but there's the miracle nipples, there's little cat tack tips. Sometimes you can get a litter and they nurse really well. And it can go very quickly, just as fast as tube feeding. So again, this is the way I do it. But I do also try some of the more natural feeding techniques with syringe feeding as well, because it's less invasive. Putting a tube down your throat into your stomach is invasive. It can be stressful. Mm-hmm. And it's an advanced technique. You can accidentally, harm the animal if it's done incorrectly. And sometimes things just happen. So again, it's something to learn under the guidance of an experienced tube feeding rehabilitator or your veterinarian. So that's how I typically do it. Again, you're going to have your formula, kind of calculate out, their nutritional requirements for the day and how much formula you need to give, and then stomach capacity. So that's a big one in all mammals and birds. And rabbits are unique is because mom's only feeding them twice a day. They have a much larger stomach capacity than other mammals. So rabbit stomach capacity is calculated at 10% of their body weight.
Yeah, for most mammals and even birds, it's 5%.
Correct.
So it's like double.
Yeah, mm-hmm. They're double. So you never want to exceed that stomach capacity. Even if you're syringe feeding and you've got a really good nurser, they'll just keep nursing and they can, have other gastrointestinal issues from essentially overeating. So, again, I've got my formula, it's warmed up. I'll, have these small flexible tubes. For rabbits, I'm going to be using, for the little guys, it's a 3.5 French tube. And then I also have 5 French tubes on hand for when they get a little bit older. Mm-hmm. I like to have it kind of in some warm water to make it a little bit softer and more pliable. This is where a lot of times I'll just, kind of wipe the tip of it in a little bit of that Benny back, mm-hmm. and then dip it in water. So it's kind of lubricated. It's got that, the Benny back on there, and then to gently, again, insert it into their mouth, down their esophagus to their stomach. Mm-hmm. You're going to measure the tube before you insert it to know kind of where your landmarks are for your tube. And if your tube's stopping short from where that stomach should be, from where you measured how much tube should go in, it's very possible that you're in, into the airway or into the lungs. Mm-hmm. So if your tube's not easily going in and going to your, measured landmark, you need to, pull out the tube and stop, and either re-advance it. You can take it out and try again.
Right.
Also, if you're in the airway, the rabbit usually reacts much stronger to it. That's not comfortable to have anything in your airway. That's wrong. Our bodies react to that.
Right.
So, a lot of these rabbits, they kind of get used to it, but they do struggle a little bit, but they also sometimes struggle just with any type of handling. But if mm-hmm. you're noting that there's a difference in your rabbit's behavior with your, that feeding time, to really kind of take a break and, pull it out and reassess if there's any, again, if it's in the wrong place or anything like that. Slowly dispensing the formula. You don't want to just quickly plunge it all and fill them up like a balloon. That's not comfortable. You can think if that happened to yourself. And so slowly, dispensing all the formula into their stomach. And then, pinching off the tube and removing it. The reason you want to pinch off the tube is that so if there's any other little drips or drops as you're removing it, it's not getting into that airway. Mm-hmm. You're doing this with the animal belly down. So standard mammal care, we don't feed wildlife. Mammals aren't fed like humans are on their back.
Right.
Unique like that. So these babies are, on their stomach, their head may be slightly raised up, kind of wrapped in a towel. If you have a high stress individual, again, kind of covering those eyes can sometimes help with stress. And then again, you're dispensing that formula, removing it, and then moving on to the next part of care. That's going to be the stimulation of the rabbit.
It's all about the poop.
Yes, it is all about the poop.
So, okay. So what does that look like?
Okay. And I actually almost, if anything, got a little out of order. I always stimulate my rabbits before I feed them.
Oh, okay.
So, they have a big stomach capacity, which means that they also make a lot of urine. They have, they drink a lot from mom. When they're baby mammals, they're not able to urinate on their own. And mm-hmm. so mom is stimulating them to go to the bathroom by licking them. Mm-hmm. Mom's usually doing this after she's feeding them because she's cleaning them off, things like that. I like to do it beforehand because then I'm getting a true weight of that rabbit.
So you stimulate, weigh, feed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, if you have a little, 40-gram rabbit, they may have like 3 milliliters of urine in them.
That's a lot.
I'm throwing numbers out there, but they've got big bladders to match their big stomachs. So stimulating beforehand gives you a true weight. Mm-hmm. I think it's also more comfortable for the rabbit. So if they have a full bladder and then you fill up their abdomen, that's a lot of space and pressure in that abdominal cavity. Mm-hmm. So, and some of this I may be kind of reflecting or, kind of imposing on the rabbits from my own self, but it's, you think of what would be comfortable for me. Do I want to, drink a gallon of water when I haven't peed for 12 hours? No.
Yeah, probably not.
More comfortable.
And I think we can extrapolate, right? Yes. We're both mammals.
So stimulating them. So this, you're going to be, gently stimulating their urogenital area. So mm-hmm. you can use, a soft material. You don't want to harm that delicate skin. So cotton balls, high quality, Kleenex or facial tissue paper, Toilet paper, again, is nice because it's nice and absorbent. It falls apart a little bit easier once it gets wet. It's meant to break up in the toilet systems. But again, high quality. So a lot of times we want to, save pennies in all of our wildlife rehab activities. I find that investing in, again, a soft absorbent material for stimulating of the rabbits is going to help protect, that skin from any breakdown. So you're going to, potentially get it warm with just a little bit of warm water to kind of moisten it and gently rub that area. Now I know, Gail, you're waiting for this.
I am waiting for this. I can't wait. Everybody's going to love this. They're going to love this. Okay, go.
How to talk about this where I can't show it. So
maybe we'll have to figure out like a little video or something that we can put in the resources so people can see this in action.
Yes. And I think I have a video of it from other presentations that I've done. So rabbits are finicky in everything they do, and they like to be stimulated very quickly. So it's not just this slow, stimulation of the urogenital area. They like it kind of rapidly rubbed, if you will. And that can be challenging on the wrist for us caregivers.
Yes, because you're not being like Mother Rabbit. You're not licking.
Yes.
No.
No.
Don't go there.
Yes.
Okay. So
I found I do a large quantity of rabbits every summer. I'm, per my capacity, I'm a high volume in-home rehabber. I often have multiple litters of babies at a time. And again, I work long hours. So a lot of my being able to continue to provide this service to our, wild community and our human community that finds these animals is to manage my time. And then my wrist.
And your wrist.
So I found that stimulating the rabbits was actually one of the most time-consuming parts of my caregiving. And I found and developed, well, I don't want to say I developed it because I'm sure somebody else has come up with something creative as well, but there is a product now. I got mine at IKEA, but I basically just was trying to get creative, and there must be something that can, vibrate or rotate that we can use to safely, rub the urogenital area. So they have these little, I think they're like coffee frothers. It's like it's a little stick, and it has a little circular whisk on the end.
Okay.
I got mine at IKEA. I think they're like $1.50 or $1.99 each.
Okay.
Now, I do buy them in bulk because I do wear through the motors because I'm not using them as intended. And basically what I do is I take that high quality tissue paper. I kind of pull it up through the whisk because it's like a stick with, it kind of looks almost like a halo.
Okay. So it has a little loop at the end that you can.
It has a little loop. And obviously you don't want any spinning metal part touching the rabbit. That's not safe. So I pull up my, high quality tissue. And again, this is where high quality matters, because if it's at all kind of scratchy or abrasive, as that spins, that's going to essentially kind of be like sandpaper.
Oh yeah.
So that's why, again, high quality tissue, kind of pull it up through there, turn it on, and it starts spinning. So it's basically kind of like I don't guess exactly what it sounds like. It's just this little spinning wad of tissue paper. I kind of slightly dampen the speed when it's a brand new product and the batteries are fresh. It spins what I would consider too fast to be safe. So I kind of pinch the shaft of it, I guess, to slow down the rotational speed.
Okay.
I always test it on my wrist first. So just like how you'd kind of potentially test formula to make sure it's not too hot on the inside of your wrist, I test the stimulation wand, if you will, and the tissue paper to make sure that it's soft, it's not abrasive. And then, I'll take my rabbits, point them down. They will pee a good distance. And so you'll want to make sure that they're kind of pointed down. Don't point them at your face or anything. I mean, it's not going to spray significant distances, but it can be more than you would expect maybe for this tiny little rabbit. So point them down, into a garbage container. or if you're using like a utility sink or something like that, you don't put them down, and you're just going to very gently, kind of touch the tip of that rotating tissue paper to the rabbit. I usually don't hold it and just let it spin. I kind of just kind of repeatedly bump it up against the rabbit.
Okay. So touch and release, touch and release, touch and release kind of
Yes,
thing.
correct. Okay. Yeah. And it works great. They go almost instantaneously. Whereas if anyone else has ever stimulated rabbits, you can know it can sometimes take a little while to get them going. So it works almost instantaneously. I get them to void or to empty their bladders completely every time. Sometimes if the tissue paper gets saturated, you might have to change it out and replace it with a new one.
Sure.
But I find I'm able to very quickly stimulate my rabbits. I do it in a safe manner, by testing it and kind of always assessing the skin to make sure that there's no irritation or skin breakdown. And then my wrist is saved and I can actually use my right hand, and it's not, all carpal tunnel-y or arthritis-y. I'm trying to stimulate rabbits. So I found that it's really helped with my, continued dexterity and function of my right hand. It's sped up the care of my rabbits, which is important in my realm as a wildlife rehabilitator. Again, that's kind of the biggest limiting factor to me as a wildlife rehabilitator is my work schedule.
Okay. Right. Defecation. Do they defecate at the same time when you're stimulating them to urinate?
They often do. They will also sometimes just defecate on their own. So the stimulation is absolutely critical for the voiding or the release of urine. They do make little poops. So as you're cleaning your cage or taking them out, you'll notice, the little itty bitty poops in the cage with them. But they oftentimes that stimulation will also get them to defecate as well. Okay. And it's a great time, obviously you're going to be assessing any stool in the cage, but also to look as that comes out fresh. Are there any signs of diarrhea or any other issues with that stool?
Right.
Also your urine, when they first come in, it can be super dark, almost brown, because it's been, potentially sitting in there. They're very dehydrated. It's very concentrated. And then, those first couple of feedings, when it's more dilute, it's going to lighten up. It can sometimes almost be clear. And then you're going to kind of get to a balance of the color of the urine of kind of, a normal yellowish to amber color.
Okay. Excellent. That was Laura Davich-Jette, a Minnesota-based go-to expert on caring for young eastern cottontail rabbits and RHDV2. In the next episode, we switch gears to a topic incredibly important to the field of wildlife rehabilitation, a phenomenon that is commonly called compassion fatigue. This is a discussion with Stephanie McMahon, therapist and board chair of the Aspen Valley Wildlife Sanctuary in Ontario, Canada, and Dr. Renee Schott, medical director at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center of Minnesota. Our conversation delves into what compassion fatigue is, how to recognize it, and how we can all mutually support each other in this rewarding but oh so challenging profession, caring for wildlife. This was another episode of Wildlife Rehabilitation from Rescue to Release. We're glad you joined us today. Wildlife Rehabilitation from Rescue to Release is a production of Partners for Wildlife, working hand in hand with wildlife rehabilitators and veterinarians to improve the welfare of orphaned, ill, and injured wildlife. Our executive producer is me, Gail Buell. I'm the partnership coordinator for Partners for Wildlife at the University of Minnesota, College of Veterinary Medicine's Raptor Center. To learn more about the Raptor Center and Partners for Wildlife, visit Raptor at umn.edu. Our producer is Kirk Clockey. Are you interested in becoming a licensed wildlife rehabilitator? Visit the National Wildlife Rehabilitators Association website at nwrawildlife.org for resources to get started. And remember, if you do find an injured or orphaned animal, please contact a licensed wildlife rehabilitator in your area. And that's our show. Hope you'll join us next time.